Tonight on The ReidOut.
I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind? Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life. Get a great effing criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it."
We now know why that White House lawyer told John Eastman to get a great effing lawyer, and why Eastman then tried to jump on the last lifeboat asking for a pardon. It was all explained in great detail at today's blockbuster January 6th hearing. But we begin with a different January 6th. January 6th, 2001, which played out this way after the disputed results in Florida.
Is the objection in writing and signed by a member of the House and a senator?
The objection is in writing, and I don't care that it is not signed by a member of the Senate.
The chair will advise that the rules do care.
Now, we all remember what happened next. George W. Bush's election was certified by Al Gore, the vice president at the time, and Bush was inaugurated. His opponent, Vice President Al Gore, did not try to stop that from happening. No one suggested that Gore had any constitutional authority to do so, since, in fact, that was never a thing, despite a history of multiple disputed American presidential elections, including the one which also hinged on disputed Florida results back in 1876, which led to the creation of the Electoral Count Act. During today's hearing, however, Gregory Jacob, who was lead counsel to Vice President Pence, was asked if he confronted Trump lawyer John Eastman with that fact and many other objections to Eastman's outre interpretation of the Electoral Count Act, and this is what he said.
Back in 2000, you weren't jumping up and saying Al Gore had this authority to do that. You would not want Kamala Harris to be able to exercise that kind of authority in 2024 when I hope Republicans will win the election, and I know you hope that too, John. And he said, absolutely. Al Gore did not have a basis to do it in 2000. Kamala Harris shouldn't be able to do it in 2024, but I think you should do it today.
In fact, Eastman was pushing this theory, even as he himself acknowledged that it was unconstitutional and wouldn't hold up in court.
Did Dr. Eastman admit in front of the president that his proposal would violate the Electoral Count Act?
Mr. Eastman acknowledged that that was the case, that even what he viewed as the more politically palatable option would violate several provisions. But he thought that we could do so because, in his view, the Electoral Count Act was unconstitutional.
Jacob also testified that Eastman acknowledged that if his theory that Pence could delay certification of President Biden's victory made it to the Supreme Court, Trump would lose unanimously, 9-0. The star of today's hearing, however, former federal judge and perennial Republican Supreme Court shortlister Michael Luttig, who advised Pence about his options, also made clear, along with Mr. Jacob, that Pence had no authority under any interpretation of the Constitution to do what Eastman proposed.
There was no basis in the Constitution or laws of the United States at all for the theory espoused by Mr. Eastman. At all. None.
Our review of text, history, and frankly just common sense all confirmed the vice president's first instinct on that point. There is no justifiable basis to conclude that the vice president has that kind of authority.
In fact, Judge Luttig spelled out how adamantly he opposed the suggestion that Pence could overturn the elections.
That declaration of Donald Trump as the next president would have plunged America into what I believe would have been tantamount to a revolution within a constitutional crisis.
For his part, John Eastman remained undeterred and later even spoke at the Ellipse on January 6th, only further inflaming the crowd with claims about a plot he, as we now know, admitted was illegal in private.
And all we are demanding of Vice President Pence is this afternoon at 1 o'clock, he let the legislatures of the state look into this so we get to the bottom of it and the American people know whether we have control of the direction of our government or not.
Taken together, today's hearing filled in the blanks of why White House lawyer Eric Hirschman advised Eastman to get a great effing lawyer, several of them, as committee member Pete Aguilar revealed yet another bombshell.
Just a few days later, Dr. Eastman emailed Rudy Giuliani and requested that he be included on a list of potential recipients of a presidential pardon. Dr. Eastman's email stated, quote, "I've decided that I should be on the pardon list, if that is still in the works."
After Trump declined to give Eastman that presidential pardon, Eastman pleaded the fifth repeatedly when deposed by the committee, 100 times to be exact. Joining me now, Olivia Troy, director of the Republican Accountability Project and a former top aide to Vice President Mike Pence. Daniel Goldman, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York and general counsel for the House Intelligence Committee during the first Trump impeachment. He's now running for Congress in New York. And Maya Wiley, president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. Thank you all for being here. I want to zero in on Mr. Eastman because it seems to me, I'm going to go right down the center of my panel here to Mr. Goldman. It seems to me that not only was what he was proposing unconstitutional, he knew it was unconstitutional. Not only did it violate the law, meaning the Electoral Count Act, he knew it violated that law. And he knew that in terms of precedent, it violated that, too, because he said Al Gore should not have had the right to do this. He thinks Kamala Harris should not have the right to do it. But, quote, we should go ahead and do this anyway. Your thoughts?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the difference between just sort of violating the Electoral Count Act and knowingly conspiring with others to interfere with the lawful functioning of government is exactly what you and Greg Jacob said today, which is that he knew that what he was advocating for was illegal, yet he was doing it anyway. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can take the word of District Judge Carter out in L.A., who made a finding by a preponderance of the evidence that Eastman may have committed that exact crime, conspiring to defraud to overturn the election. And who was his co-conspirator, according to Judge Carter? Donald Trump. So if John Eastman is taking the fifth, is asking for a pardon, because he clearly at that point recognized that he was in criminal hot water, the only other people who were really integrally involved in pushing Eastman's theory were Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, and Donald Trump. It does seem at this point like what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is most of the rest of White House officials were behind the scenes pushing against this whole scheme, but that Eastman kept pushing forward. I mean, even to the point where he fully acknowledged that what he was doing was illegal, but he just wanted Vice President Pence to do it anyway.
And, you know, let me just read for a second, Maya, from the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, because I thought that aside from everything else that we're learning, it's a fantastic civics lesson that Americans are getting by watching these hearings, because people don't necessarily know the minutia of what's in the Constitution. But one thing is pretty clear. If you do remember January 6, 2001, that the position of the vice president in that moment is ceremonial. It's purely ceremonial. It's like the Oscars. You know, the person reading the Oscars envelope doesn't determine who wins the Oscar. They're literally just reading it. And so is the vice president. And Mr. Pence went and asked people who would know. He asked people like Michael Luttig. He went and asked the former vice president, Dan Quayle. He went and asked people just to be sure. And his counsel asked. And they were told, no, you need to stick with this. The president of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes then shall be counted. Period. That's the job. And yet his persistence, Maya, is what's mind-boggling here. Right up until the day of the insurrection, he himself gets on at the podium and starts still spouting this demand to Mike Pence. What do you make of all this?
Look, I make of all this what was already largely in the public eye, but that these hearings are making crystal clear with additional new and powerful evidence, which is everybody, including those close to Donald Trump, appointed by Donald Trump, that Donald Trump chose to take before Senate confirmation, that he relied upon to defend him in impeachment and brought into the White House counsel's office. These are his close supporters, all saying the same thing behind closed doors, which is, no, this is insanity. This is crazy. Judge Luttig, I mean, the thing about this is a person with whom I know I personally would share very few things that we would agree upon. I can say that the saving an American democracy requires us all to recognize what the boundaries are. That 12th Amendment is a clear, crystal clear boundary. And what we have seen, what I make of it is those who seek power, like a John Eastman, like a Rudy Giuliani, and like a Donald Trump, are really saying, we will ignore the Constitution of the United States if it serves us. And the reason this committee hearing, I hope, is getting the time and attention it deserves is because the true message here is, no matter your political beliefs or your party, this is an existential crisis if we believe lies because they are told repeatedly, including lies about what our Constitution tells us.